Hey y'all, I am Sunny Shell, and tonight I am thrilled to have Raj Raghunathan to discuss his book, If You're So Smart, Why Aren't You Happy? So sit back, buckle up, and let's get to the sunny spot on Skeptic Haven.
If we are not able to ask skeptical questions, to interrogate those who tell us that something is true, to be skeptical of those in authority, then we're up for grabs for the next charlatan, political or religious, who comes ambling along.
Dare to be skeptical.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad that you're joining us tonight on this sunny spot. I want to introduce to you Raj Raghunathan. Did I say that right?
Said it perfectly. Very good.
Great. So Raj is Sale Centennial Professor of Business at the McCombs School of Business in UT Austin. And what I'm interested in is what he's interested in, issues related to happiness and well-being. And his research has appeared in top journals such as the Journal of Consumer Research and mass media outlets like the New York Times, Fortune, and others. He was also in Psychology Today in a blog, Sapient Nature, and has over 2 million page views. His online course on employee happiness was rated as a top MOOC, massive open online course. And I am just really, really excited to talk with you. In my regular job, my real life job, I'm an executive director of a nonprofit. And it's a very trauma infused type of a field. We deal with children who have been abused. And one thing that I really focus on with my staff is self-care, and not just self-care as, go get a pedicure, but really looking at the root causes of our stress and trying to solve the root problem. We're never going to solve the root problem, but finding those positive coping mechanisms and looking at the real ways to become happier in our lives, both in our workplaces and at home. So this is something that is really interesting to me.
Yeah, it sounds great. And I just came back after working out in the gym. And in the moment, it's a tough thing to do, but I feel great now. And I don't know if you would include it under self-care, but I do.
Absolutely. Yes, I do. I have an autoimmune disease. So exercise, eating healthy, and all of those things, they not only assist with my sense of well-being, but with my overall health. So I agree with you. I think that's awesome. So diving right in, I want to kind of get really jump into your book. The first thing I wanted to ask you was kind of a more overarching thing. What type of studies were done as you were doing this book, and how were they administered?
So the kinds of studies that I tend to do are experiments. And ideally, I do what are called randomized control trial experiments. And basically, without getting very technical about it, I take a group of people, let's say 100 people, and I put them in a certain condition. For example, it might be an exercise condition. We just spoke about exercising. And then I take another group of people who are more or less the same in terms of their demographics and psychographics and profiles and stuff like that, lifestyle. And I then put them in a what might be called a control condition where they are not necessarily asked to exercise, for example. And then I assess, are there any differences between the two groups as time goes on? And if there are, for example, the group that was asked to exercise reports feeling happier, then that would be an indication that exercising seems to lead to more positive emotional states, for example. So a lot of the data and findings in my book come from these kinds of studies. I honestly only conducted a small fraction of them. The studies that I report in the book, maybe 95%, I'm just throwing out a number. I'm not sure if it's accurate, but 95% of them were conducted by other researchers and about 5% by me.
Okay, well, that makes sense because in order to get some really good data, you have to have a large pool to pull from. And so that's good. I wonder if any of the studies that you pulled from, or any of the studies that you have done, are they any longitudinal studies?
Yeah, some of the studies I report in there are longitudinal studies.
Okay.
And I imagine that your audience knows what that means. So I'm going to leave it there.
I I hope so. I'm glad that you said that, because sometimes I do say things in a way that that I should probably break things down. So longitudinal is like long term, and looking at the participants over the course of their lives. It could be 10 years, it could be 20 years. Some of the best ones are longer. You want to get some really good data that way. So, and I really prefer those in the work that I do. We have the ACEs study. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, and it's a longitudinal study done by the Kaiser Permanente Institute. And I fall back on that a lot with some of the work that I do, and in looking at ways to assist not only the children, but the parents that are trying to raise them and help them. And so those longitudinal studies, I think, are very fascinating, and you can get so much from them. But anyway, so going into your book, what was the main focus besides happiness? I mean, happiness is so broad. So can you kind of narrow it down? What were you really wanting to focus on with your book?
Yeah, so I did want to talk about the determinants of happiness. What does it take to lead a happy and fulfilling life? But I wanted to target a certain specific audience. And the audience that I targeted were these smart and successful people. And these are the kinds of people that I happen to interact with a lot. I'm at the university. In particular, I'm in the business school. And the people in the business school are obviously very achievement oriented, and a lot of them do end up achieving a lot, and are also very smart. It's tough to get into the business school at a top ranked university like the University of Texas at Austin. And you would think that people who are smart, who are headed for success or are already successful, would be good at achieving their goals. And we all know that happiness is a very important goal for us. And so you would think that the smart and successful people would be happier than the not so smart and not so successful. But in fact, there is a smaller correlation between being smart and successful and how happy you are. And so I was just very curious about this phenomenon as to why it is that smartness and success doesn't lead to happiness when you might logically think that it should. And in particular, I was very interested in some of the ways in which one's smartness and success can actually come in the way of happiness, far from promoting happiness, can actually kind of be an obstacle to happiness. And so I was interested in those kinds of issues.
Oh, that's fascinating. As you were talking, I was just brainstorming, thinking of some things like when you are more successful, you end up having a lot more stressors on you and demands on you that are different than, say, making sure that there's food on the table for your family. It's a very different type of a stress that's on you. And I've also noticed, at least in the work that I do and in my personal life, that those who maybe struggle in a different way with stress find happiness in things that truly matter and that are simpler. Whereas people who are successful tend to find happiness, or try to find happiness, in things that are more complex and that maybe don't matter as much. Am I correct in that or not?
Yeah, you could be correct in that. I don't know off the top of my head data that speak to that. It does seem like a very viable hypothesis, and that should be tested. So there were two things that you mentioned there. The first is that people who are successful seem to kind of have a lot more, a wider set or a more intense set of stressors on them. And that would seem to be true. So if you're higher up in the organization, for example, ultimately the buck stops at you. And so, you have more responsibilities and things like that. That would add to the stress. And the second thing that you said is that maybe if you're successful, then you're more likely to seek what might be called more extraordinary experiences. You want to kind of, go to Europe for a vacation, or you want to have a fancy whiskey when you're winding down in the evening, as opposed to just a bud, like a beer, cheap beer, and so on. And actually, now that I think about it, I'm recalling some studies that do point to not necessarily that the more successful you are, the more likely you are to seek out more extraordinary experiences. That seems like it should obviously be true. If you have more success, you have more money, you have more resources at your disposal, why wouldn't you go to fancy vacation spots? Why wouldn't you eat at the fancy restaurants? Why wouldn't you have a fancier home, and so on? But I was thinking of research that shows that the more you have a fancy and more extraordinary set of experiences in your life, the less happiness you derive from a future fancy vacation or a future fancy meal. So that seems to make sense. And as far as the first part is concerned, which is that the higher up you are, the more intense the set of stressors on you. That also seems like it would be true. But in fact, Sunny, what's kind of interesting is that what the research shows is that the higher you are in status, the more positive overall you feel in terms of your psychological state. And also, the longer you live, there are these famous studies called the Whitehall studies that show that. And so it seems like, on the one hand, you could see how the higher up you are, the more status you have, the more successful you are, you would have more stressors on you. But on the other hand, you would also, there would be a countervailing force, which is that the higher up you are, the more resources you have at your disposal, the more you can order everyone about to get your job done. And so that would then make you less stressed out. And it seems like, on balance, people are higher up or are less stressed out. But that's not true for everybody who's higher up. And the interesting thing is that while being higher in status or fame or being wealthier certainly does seem to increase your happiness levels, the more you pursue those things, right? The more you chase superiority, the more you are feverish for the next promotion, and so on, it actually reduces your happiness. And so it's a kind of an interesting kind of a phenomenon. So it's better for you to end up in a spot where you have higher status, more access to resources, and so on and so forth. But you're best off ending up there without chasing it, without pursuing it, but rather kind of like, if you're focused on your work and those things come as a byproduct of your achieving things, rather than because you were really keen on achieving those things, that's when you're likely to be happy, rather than if you're the kind of like superiority seeking type. If
that is so important. I actually had a conversation with my sister-in-law not that long ago, and we were talking about how both of us came from poverty, and we've had to struggle to work our way up. She's a very successful RN, and I'm an executive director of a nonprofit. Neither of us make the money we should, so money isn't really the factor. There's a sense of fulfillment in the work that we do, but at the same time, there's a sense of wishing we could get back to the simpler, and so it's it almost feels like the struggles that we had were struggles of basic survival type of stressors. We worried about, are we going to have enough this month to pay our rent? Are we going to have enough to feed our family? Those type of things. But we seem to find happiness in, like, when a child smiles, it was like the greatest thing. And now we're so disconnected from things because it's constantly trying to reach the next thing. And so we were wondering if we really are any happier. We neither of us now have to necessarily worry about our next meal. And that's certainly something that is much better. I don't want to ever go back to that, but at the same time, I don't have the opportunities anymore to enjoy the smaller things, the simpler things, the things that really brought me intense fulfillment. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Yeah, you're making sense. Actually, there is a body of work on the so-called ordinary versus extraordinary experiences, and the amount of happiness and joy that people derive from them. And one of the findings is that people who are older, say 65, 70 years old, that kind of an age range, they tend to derive greater happiness from the ordinary events.
Mm-hmm.
And people who are younger tend to derive more happiness from the more extraordinary events. And one level, it might seem somewhat counterintuitive in the sense that if you've seen a lot in your life, you've obviously seen a lot of stuff, ordinary and extraordinary, and you would imagine that at this point, you're kind of blasé, and unless something really stands out, you're not really going to enjoy that a lot, right? Because you've presumably been to, more vacation spots, for example, or more variety of restaurants as you're older than when you're younger. And also when you're older, you tend to have a little more money than when you're younger, and so on. So it would seem that you could see how it could be the other way around, where when you're older is when you stop appreciating ordinary things and you want extraordinary things. But in fact, the study finds the opposite. And one way of looking at it is that as you get older, you kind of settle into being happy with life in general. You've kind of reconciled what has happened. You've seen the ups and the downs, and you realize that, look, I mean, if I don't kind of enjoy the things that are going on right now around me, like you brought up a great example of a child smiling, or you can think about a bird building a nest. You can think about a sunrise. You can think about having a nice, cozy cup of tea in the morning when everything is quiet, no one else has woken up. You can think about just staying home with your dog and reading a book, right? These are relatively ordinary experiences, and almost everybody in the world probably has access to most of these things, and we tend to devalue them, I think. But as you get older, you tend to kind of reappreciate, so to speak, those things. And the other interesting thing is that these things are appreciated more, these ordinary things are appreciated more if you have had a traumatic event in your life. So that's very interesting stuff. It's the area of research is called post-traumatic growth. So some of the people have seen death at close quarters, or seen their house burn down, or had a really bad divorce. You can think about traumatic events, right? And people who have had them tend to experience PTSD, of course, right, which is very well known. But actually, the more prevalent thing that most of these people experience is what's called PTG, or post-traumatic growth. And post-traumatic growth comes in many different it manifested in many different ways. But one of the ways in which it's manifested is through appreciation of these ordinary things. And you said something interesting. I know I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you said that back in the day you used to appreciate those things, and now that you've seen kind of more, worldly success, I'm just using this as a term to represent what, you've achieved. You've kind of risen up the ranks. You're a director, and your sister-in-law is similarly kind of, high up in status. You said something along the lines of you feel like you don't get to have the opportunity to appreciate those things, or something like that. The opportunity is there, right? I mean, it's not as if there's this, children have stopped smiling, or sunrises have stopped happening, or things like that. It's like what we pay attention to, right? And what is salient in our mind. And I think that the set of goals that we have set for ourselves, the set of priorities that we have, kind of crowd out those other more ordinary things, right? That's one way to look at it. And I think there's a justifiable reason why they crowd it out, because these are in some sense more important. There are people reporting to you. There are children whose well-being depends on your actions, right? So do you now kind of prioritize watching a sunrise or having a good cup of tea, or do you prioritize sending out that email that could actually kind of have an impact on some child's well-being, right? And I think that you prioritize the latter over the former, right? And the question is there a way in which you can kind of have both of them, right? That would be ideal. And in fact, if you think about mindfulness as a practice, I think that that's what it tries to do, I think, at some level, is to kind of like think back into the moment, even if it's only for a few moments, just appreciate whatever's going on around you, just the ordinariness, so to speak, of many everyday events have so much charm in them, right? I don't know what the right
Yeah.
word is, but, just watching a sunbeam coming through the window and the angles changing and the little particles of dust floating around in them, that can be a beautiful sight to watch, right? And it can be quite
Yes.
interesting and engrossing, or even just observing your breath, which is a very ordinary thing, easily available, could be an extraordinary experience. And so it's available to us. It's a matter of kind of, prioritizing it, or realizing that, hey, these are important things too, and these are great sources of happiness and calmness and peace and serenity, and reprioritizing them, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, it absolutely makes sense. Oh gosh, you said so many things that resonate with me. One of the things that my staff and I have started doing, just down the street from where I work, there's a place that offers now these. It's called $5 Wednesday yoga, and
Oh.
it's just a way for anyone. We're in a downtown, and so anyone who can come on their lunch break and can do this wonderful yoga and kind of refocus. And so we've done it, and our agency pays for that for any staff who wants to do that. And so what I have found is, so I used to have a strong mindfulness practice, and it's kind of gone away from that. This has helped me to kind of return to that, whether I want to or not, in a sense, because I get so bogged down with my day-to-day work. As soon as I walk in, I'm hit from all different angles. I have grants I have to deal with. I have staff. I have kids coming in. I have my multidisciplinary teams. I have my board. I have all these things, and I forced it to stop at that time, at least once a week. And we change into our workout, and we walk down the street, and we are in this wonderful. We call him the yoga teacher, and he is the happy yoga. He is very happy in his yoga, and he gets us laughing and gets us just. It's a break in a way. It's not just the yoga. The yoga is good for our bodies and it's good for our minds, but it's also good for the way that we just stop and take stock, in a sense. And so everything that you're saying, it makes me smile, because I'm thinking about those things that really make a difference. It's a simple thing, but it really does make that difference. So anyway, I really enjoyed what you were saying. So much that you said that resonates with me. So my question to you then is, with everything that we've said, does money really make anybody happy?
Yeah, so this has been a topic that's been kind of going back and forth between two camps, one that claims that money doesn't make you happier, and the other camp claims that it does. And we seem to have a bit of a resolution about 15 years ago or 20 years ago, when Daniel Kahneman, who's a Nobel Prize winner, and his co-author Angus Deaton, they found that money does seem to kind of move the needle in terms of overall life satisfaction, which is a more kind of a cognitive assessment that we make about our overall life, where we are, how our future prospects are, kind of a long time frame kind of evaluation of our life. But it doesn't seem to really make a big difference to our moment-to-moment happiness. And so if somebody were to follow people who are rich versus poor and observe what's going on in terms of how much they smile or laugh or things like that, more money you have doesn't seem to make that much of a difference. But it does make a difference up to about 75, at that time, about 20 years ago, $75,000 per year per household. Now that amount might be, let's say, closer to $100,000 because of inflation and things like that. So up to that point, it does make a big difference, right? But between $100,000 and $1 million, it doesn't make a difference in terms of your moment-to-moment happiness. But it does have somewhat of a slight positive effect. The more money you have, the happier you are in terms of your overall evaluation of your life. So a person who makes $1 million a year might say something like, if I look at my life overall, on a 10-point scale, I'd rate myself, let's say, an 8. Whereas somebody who makes $100,000 per household might say, I'm probably a 7.5, right? So there is a small difference, but it's a reliable difference in a specific direction, that people who make more overall evaluate their overall life a little bit higher. But it doesn't seem to make a difference to their moment-to-moment happiness. But again, I mean, this idea that up to $100,000 is very, very, very important, because if you're talking about poverty levels, then absolutely money makes a big difference. Probably the single biggest booster of happiness at that point, when you're only earning, let's say, $20,000, $30,000 a year as a household. Any extra income that you can get is going to absolutely move the needle, no doubt about it. Now, there is more recent work showing that even for these moment-to-moment happiness, more money seems to be better. But it's qualified by how you spend your money. And there are some people who know how to spend money in a way that boosts their happiness, and other people don't seem to really know how to spend money in the sense they don't know how to kind of spend it in a way that increases their happiness. And so here, I think in broad stroke terms, the big finding is that if you spend money in ways that help other people out, for example, right? Or you're spending it to have experiences as opposed to hoarding material things. If you're using money in order to kind of free up your chores, the chores that you hate doing, right? So you were absolutely bad at hanging paintings in your house, right? But you can't bring yourself to use TaskRabbit to have somebody come over and paint, hang these paintings. And you try to do it yourself to save that money, or you absolutely hate doing the dishes, but you can't bring yourself to spend a little bit of money to have a maid do it, etc. Then you're not spending money right? So there are ways in which you can use money. Money is what money does, right? By itself sitting in a bank, what is it? It's just pieces of paper, right? Or something in a digital record. But if you know how to spend money in a way that increases other people's happiness, or you're buying experiences that you want to experience in your life, or you want to kind of like free up your time, etc., then it does seem that some people are good at that, so they don't kind of get attached to money and seeing the bank balance kind of keep increasing, but they use it in ways in which it ends up benefiting them emotionally, right? Does it make sense? So
that absolutely makes sense.
Yeah. So it's a kind of a bit of a complex answer. I think that overall, yes, money is important, more important than we thought earlier in our research, but less important than people think it is. I think that if you ask people, what is the relationship between money and happiness, even if they say that I don't think money really matters, but if you observe how they go about leading their life, it's very clear that they want more money, right? Most people want more. And there seems to be no limit to it. They want more and more and more, to such an extent that we sometimes kind of even drive ourselves into kind of overworking and burning out and not having energy and all that in the quest for money. At that level, absolutely, it's not worth it. More money doesn't make you happier if you're that kind of a person. So money makes you happier than no money does, but it doesn't make you as happy as people think it does. And in particular, if you know how to spend money, then it does kind of make you happier. But you have to kind of also protect your time, your family, your relationships, and compared to those things, and your health, compared to those things, money is not as important.
That's a really interesting way of kind of transitioning from money into, your relationships and how they can either make us happy or hinder our happiness. So a lot of people nowadays younger people are not getting married. That's just not seen as something that's very important. Does marriage make us happier? Is that, some people say it's just a piece of paper. Other people say it's a making that true commitment. So do the studies show that we are actually happier when we make that legal commitment, or are we happier if we don't necessarily look at it in that way, but we're having a committed relationship with another person?
That's a great question, Sunny. And the thing with these kinds of studies and the results is that these are not, remember earlier when you asked me this question of, what kind of studies do you do? I said randomized control trials are the kind of gold standard. I didn't use the word gold standard then, but they are. So the idea of a randomized control is study is that as you're recruiting participants for the study, you kind of assign them to the control or the intervention group in a random fashion, right? So if you really wanted to test out if marriage increases happiness versus not, then what you would do is that you would have participants enroll in the study, and then you would say, okay, participant number 1, I'm assigning you randomly to, let's see, I toss a coin, and okay, you're in the marriage group, so you get married now and come back to me, right? And participant 2, toss a coin, oh, you're in the no married group, okay, so don't get married, okay, and come back to me, and I'll assess your happiness, right? So the reason why this is so important is because we want to make sure that anything else that could also affect happiness is equal across the two groups, right? So some people might be born happy, or some people might come from good families, right? Or some people might be prone to exercising more and not using drugs and things like that. And so they are more stable in terms and happy, positive in terms of their happiness. And so that could be affecting their happiness too. And we want to kind of make sure that across these two groups, those other things that could also contribute to happiness are more or less equal, right? That's what randomization does for us. And the problem, as you can, as you, I'm sure, recognize, I saw you smiling when I was saying, this is how we will do the study, is that we can't randomly assign people to one condition versus the other. And so the people who are prone to getting married might have other qualities in them that also determine their happiness or also have an influence on their happiness. And so we can't say for sure it's marriage that's making them happier or not. It might be these other things, right? They might be just more people oriented or commitment oriented or whatever it is that takes somebody to say, yes, I do want to get married, or more kind of traditional or rule following or norm following or whatever, So that said, the evidence that we do have seems to suggest that marriage does increase happiness. Now, the studies that I'm aware of have compared married to unmarried as a whole. And I can't, off the top of my head, recall the studies that partitioned the participant group into married versus the other group being not married but in committed relationships. From what I can remember of the studies, that group that was not married included the group that was in committed relationships, but also had people that were not married or were in serial monogamous relationships or in open relationships and so on and so forth. But yeah, marriage does seem to increase happiness. So for men, married men tend to live 5 years longer than unmarried men.
I could think of so many. I'm sorry, so many things that I could say. Is it because women tend to take care of them, or traditionally, is it because they're happy, or because they're, someone's saying, "Hey, you need to go to the doctor."
Yeah, true.
I think that's just
yeah.
It might be a stereotypical thing. So I always worry when I say things kind of a blanket statement.
Yeah,
because
that's a very fair point. What is very clear is having healthy relationships is like critical for happiness for human beings. I mean, that I don't think anybody would have any arguments with. And you talked about longitudinal studies. There's this grand study that I'm pretty sure that you're aware of. Robert Waldinger was the director for it, and he has a TED Talk which came about 10 years ago. Excellent TED Talk, one of my favorites, in which he talks about all the benefits that accrue to you if you have at least one really caring and intimate relationship. And that confers upon you so many advantages. It's incredible. And so if you only had one thing that you could do, then in order to be happier and live longer, I would say that it's to invest in relationships. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be marriage, it could be friendship. It could be a sibling relationship. It doesn't matter, for that matter, even having a pet increases happiness.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. I know that, for instance, my mom, I'm using all these personal examples, but it's what comes up to me. My dad passed away a few years ago. My mom just told me, we're just talking last night because his birthday was yesterday. And she said, I don't know if I would have been able to handle his passing in the same way that I've been able to if I didn't have my dog. And my dad encouraged her to get the dog because we knew he was dying. He had cancer.
Mm.
And so he kind of knew that she would need something like that.
Mm.
And oh my goodness, she loves that dog. I think she loves the dog more than she loves me. But it's been a wonderful thing for her. That dog has been fantastic for her. And so I can absolutely see where you're coming from. It doesn't necessarily have to be a marriage. It can be that strong relationship with another person, a friend, a sibling, or even a dog or a cat or whatever you connect with. One thing I do want to ask you though has to do okay with kids. The reason I asked is I have 5 kids, and my youngest are graduating high school.
Wow.
And I can tell you that kids are both a happy and a not so happy. They're very, very hard, and I don't think that young people, when they're going into that, really realize the how difficult it is to raise your kids and what.
It's a good thing they don't realize that.
Oh, you're exactly right. If they did, we'd just be extinct. For instance, when my daughter, she's the youngest of all. I have 4 boys and 1 girl, and she just had a car accident, totaled her car, and she's fine, but she is really experiencing a lot of PTSD from it. She's even afraid to get back in the car. She's crying a lot over everything. You know, everything kind of triggers her now. And it breaks my heart. It's the worst absolute thing as a human. And I have been through all kinds of different experiences, but seeing my daughter, who is not a little girl anymore, she's 17, but she's my baby, and seeing her hurting like that has devastated me in ways I can't even describe. And yet there's so many other things. When my oldest son, went into the Navy, and he was so proud of himself for going in and doing that, and seeing the look on his face when he got out of boot camp and that sort of thing. Those are some of the happiest moments that I can even imagine, or just seeing their face when they were first born and being able to hug them. Do kids actually make us happier, or do they just make us crazier?
Yeah. So the short answer is that kids make you less happy on a moment-to-moment basis. So if you kind of follow a parent along as they're going about their life and look at their happiness levels, and then you do a similar thing and you follow a non-parent around as they're going about their life, then you'll notice that there are more points of frustration and stress in the parent's life than there is in the non-parent's life, right? But when you ask these 2 groups of people or 2 people to report on how meaningful they find their lives to be, this is what results from a study showed, then the parents tended to report higher levels of meaningfulness, that my life has a purpose, I am doing things that are aligned with who I want to be and how I see myself, and there's just more of a grip on life that people who are parents seem to have. And so it seems to kind of like, this is one of the contexts in which the level to which something contributes to your happiness differs in the level to which it contributes to meaning. Most other things, like, for example, if you're working out, right, or you're doing your job well, etc., it makes you both happy and contributes to meaning. But raising children is one of those few examples where happiness and meaning seem to go in the opposite directions, that it makes you less happy, but it gives you more meaning. And that, from what I remember, is for parents who are active parents, that is, that the children are still in the home. And I think I can't recall off the top of my head the studies that have looked at what happens to people whose children have kind of left home. But from what I remember from a person presenting something, that group of people is happier than the corresponding group that doesn't have same age but doesn't have any children. Once they've left home, Obviously, you're not kind of changing diapers or, making food for them or driving them around and things like that. And at that point, you have a richer social life because you have more people to connect with, right? And not just more people, these are your own people, right? And you've had an active role in raising them. And so presumably they are similar to you in some regards. And there is a whole, stream of research on this so-called homophily, which is liking for things that are similar to you. And so your children are bound to be, in all things being equal, in general, they're going to be more similar to you than random people are. And so you're going to find them to be more, I was going to say palatable, but that's not the right word. You're going to find, you're going to find them to be more, happiness inducing, let's say, right? Because of that.
So from everything that we've talked about, I can't believe that we only have 15 minutes. Actually, we have less than that because we kind of started a little bit late. I can't believe that we're so close to that because I have so many more things I want to say, but to kind of start wrapping things up, it sounds to me like what we need to be focusing on in order to be happier people is kind of finding the, I keep thinking of this phrase, and it's a business phrase, and I don't mean to use it in that way, but kind of the big why. Just to, it's, in other words, it's not that every married person is happier and every single person is not happier. They find they're happy in different ways. And those who have kids are not necessarily, it's not like each individual person is necessarily happier than another person who doesn't have kids. Person without kids can be just as happy as another person with kids. It's just the overall, we're looking at the overall kind of trend. And so it seems to me that sense of self-awareness and being mindfulness is really the true pursuit of happiness. Is that kind of what all of this tells us, maybe?
Yeah, I do think that if you look at people's kind of personalities and look at their predilections and tastes and what comes easily to them and what they like to do, etc., and they're leading a life in which that life is aligned with those things, right? So, for example, somebody might be a really big introvert, and they might also let's say documentaries, right? And if they are in general spending life in such a way that's aligned with those interests and tastes, so they tend to have a smaller group of friends with whom they connect at an intimate basis, but they don't have a life in which they are thrust into big kind of gatherings and networking events and stuff like that. And when they come home, they have the freedom to kind of watch documentaries because that's what they like to do rather than being forced to watch something else, etc. I think that there is a case to be made that they're going to be happier than if things were not aligned. That said, so in other words, I do think that I agree with you that, if you have a answer to the question of what's my big why, in other words, what is the kind of life that I think will bring me happiness and will bring me a sense of purpose, will kind of be a guiding light, a lighthouse that will point me to the direction in which I want to take my life. And then I start to kind of arrange my life in a way that's consistent with that. I do think that that is going to make a person happier. I do think, though, that there are two other things that are very important here. And one of those is, just basic kind of at a cellular level, is your body happy? Are you taking care of it, right? We talked a little bit about it in terms of self-care, right? So I do think that there is no substitute to leading a healthy lifestyle, which basically boils down to sleeping in a way that you get adequate amount of sleep, let's say 7 hours, at least, at the very least 6. I think 7 is what one should aim for. At the very least, maybe 8. If you're like me, I like 8 hours of sleep. Eating healthy, I think there's, again, it's a non-negotiable. And it may be some confusion about what is healthy, but in general, avoiding processed food, eating more green leafy vegetables and fresh vegetables, etc. Not too many kind of simple carbs and things like that. Not too many too meat heavy either on the other end. And then, finally moving, right, or exercising. I think these are very, very, very important. So that's one thing that I want. You could have a big why, but if your health is going to, the dogs, then I don't think that you're going to be happy, because it's going to catch up with you, right? You're not going to feel good inside your body. And then on the other end, I think that an attitude is very important too. I think that you do need to have a good attitude. You could have a great why, but if you're a complaining type and you're not grateful about the things that are going well in your life, etc., then you can very quickly eat into all the happiness that you built up for yourself by just having a bad attitude toward life. And so, I do think that everybody needs to spend a little bit of time and invest in adopting an attitude of gratefulness, of seeing the cup being half full rather than half empty, of generally trusting people, of feeling that life is good and that I'm taken care of, rather than that, hey, life has always been unfair to me and I want more. And, so you operate from a scarcity mindset. That's one of the worst things you can do for yourself in terms of happiness. You need to, at some level, operate from the mindset of abundance, that I have enough. And if I can't be happy with what I have right now, then chances are that it's never going to come. This is as good as it gets for most of us, right? Not everyone. If you're stuck in a war zone, etc., then that's a different story. But if you're like leading an average American life, then I think we have it pretty good here, I would say.
I agree with you. Oh gosh, I wish we had more time. I will. There's one thing I want to say, and then I want to get to our last thing, because I know you have a hard stop. So my dad used to say to me all the time, I'm telling you, we came from abject poverty. My dad had he became a banker and a finance person. I'm trying to think of the term, but anyway, he had a diary, a finance diary, and in it was an entry when I was probably 4 or 5 years old, and I had found a quarter in the grass, and he wrote it in the diary and said, "I'm so thankful. She found a quarter. She found a quarter." And it was all these exclamation points and stuff, and that brought me to tears when I read it, because it was like, wow, we really, I don't think I really fully comprehended just how poor we were. We were really, really poor. But my parents were happy. And they were struggling, and they had stress, and they wanted more for their kids. But they found the happiness in each other, and they were not the Debbie Downer types. They were always like, okay, well, this isn't so, I mean, hey, we have each other. They were kind of the silver lining type of people. And he used to tell me all the time, if you can't be happy at your worst, you will never be happy at your best. And that's always stayed with me. And so as the final thing, as we leave, if one of our viewers out there is listening to us and they're like, oh, wow, I'm kind of a Debbie Downer, I'm kind of a person who looks at the glass half empty, what is your closing thing to them? What could you tell them that might help them change to try to be a happier person?
I do have a very, very, very good tip or a suggestion for people who might be operating out of a scarcity mindset. Actually, this is a tip that anybody and everybody can use. It's going to be helpful regardless. Even if you feel like you have an abundance mindset. In fact, I think that the people who are likely to try this are the people who are already operating from abundance, because they're skeptical about things in general. They are more eager to try new things, etc. It'll definitely work for people from a scarcity mindset, maybe even more powerfully, but it's a practice that everybody can adopt. And the practice is very simple. It's called 3 Good Things journaling. And so you write in your journal 3 good things that happen to you on an everyday basis. So it's very important that you're regular with the practice. This is the one kind of, I guess, like difficult thing about it, is that it's got to be done regularly. You have to do it every day for a significant period of time. I'd say, 6 weeks at the very least, ideally 6 months at least, for you to start to kind of see the effects. And as you write these 3 good things that happen to you every day, you have to write about things that are non-egotistical good things. That is that, not things like I got a great raise today, or, I got like high praise from my boss today, right? I got like, a brand new suit today that looks very flattering on me. Those are all kind of egotistical good things. You
Mm-hmm.
earned them at some level. You worked hard, or and it also boosts your ego, so to speak. It makes you look superior to other people when you write those things. So you got to write about non-egotistical good things. That is the things you did not work for, but landed in your lap. So it could be like, I found a quarter, right, in the grass, or it could be that I met an old friend after a very long time that, we had completely lost touch with each other. Or it could be that I was kind of searching for my lost car keys. And lo and behold, right there under the sofa, along with the car keys, were my glasses that I thought were lost forever, right? So things like that, things that just happen to fall into your lap, that you did not work for. The reason why that's so important to write about is that because especially a scarcity-oriented person, but generally speaking, everybody suffers from, or most people suffer from, something called a negativity bias. So we tend to look at the world through the lens of, things are negative. And so, for example, as an illustration of this, if 5 people come and compliment you on something, right, maybe a good presentation or the way that you're dressed, and one person kind of say something negative about the presentation or the way you were dressed, chances are higher that you're going to remember that negative comment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is negativity bias in action, and it really served us very well in our evolutionary past to have that negativity bias, because 200 years ago, let alone 2000 years ago, our survival was not to be taken for granted, right? We were surrounded by so many dangerous things around us, and so if we had a positivity bias, then we probably got killed, because we didn't distrust somebody that was supposed to be distrusted as much, or we didn't notice a danger and we thought it was an opportunity and we got killed. And so negativity bias is good for survival. It's not good for flourishing and thriving and for happiness. And so we need to kind of replace our negativity bias with a little more of a positivity bias, or at least a neutrality kind of thing, rather than being negative, right? And the way that we nurture that positive attitude and mitigate the negativity bias is through noticing things in the world that are positive for us that we did not work for. So eventually what's going to happen if you maintain this 3 good things journaling is that after a couple of months, you're going to feel lighter. You're going to feel like there's more positive things happening around you. And it's like what you're doing is working on your subconscious filter through which you're viewing, or lens through which you're viewing life. And that filter changes from being a jaundiced filter, yellowish tinted, to more rose tinted. And so everything is going to look a little brighter, and you're going to be uplifted from within. Okay. And so that's what operating from abundance does. And then it's going to be easier for you to kind of be grateful for so many things in your life, because you're operating out of noticing things that are positive rather than noticing things that are more negative, right? So that's the practice that I really strongly encourage. And I've been doing it for now close to 10 years now. Every single day I write 3 good things in my journal, and 3 non-egotistical things. And one of the other things that you can do to bookend it in the morning, this is a night practice that I have, but in the morning, as soon as I wake up, before I even get out of bed, I just think about, okay, what are the things that are coming up in my life today? And then I kind of like, kind of savor. I mean, savor is the wrong word, I guess. Like I kind of like run the positive things that are going to happen, even if it's only having a cup of coffee, right? Or feeding my dog his dental bone, not feeding, but giving him his dental bone in the morning. Just replay. I kind of, imagine this thing happening in my head, and a smile naturally comes across my face, right? Because I mean, it's a positive thing that so rather than dreading all the, work you have to do, just lay in bed and think about 3 things, or even just one thing that's positive that's coming up. Maybe you're going to meet your daughter today, right? And just kind of like, imagine it playing out in the way that you think it is going to play out. And like, that's going to definitely boost your happiness levels and make you feel that life is more abundant, rather than only focusing on the things that are going badly. So those are the 2.
I love that. I absolutely love that. It's just like any other muscle. With more practice, it becomes easier and more efficient. I love that. Really quickly, I want to say thank you to Dan D. He gave us a $10 super chat. Happiness is right now, not around the corner or down the road. You are absolutely right. Thank you, Dan. We really appreciate it. That's exactly what we were just talking about. I want to thank you, Raj, for coming on. I really do appreciate it. This is such an important topic. It really is. I think that we are right now in a type of it's a time where we're seeing so much negativity that we can really fall in. Even positive people can fall into those holes, and we just need to make sure that we have that reminder that life isn't all bad. Granted, there are people who are, like you said, who are living in places that war-torn places and so forth. But for those of us, the average American person, we really have it pretty good. We need to recognize that. So I want to thank all of our patrons for Love Bond: Sidney Davis Jr., Eric Ozols, Rion, Deneen Murphy, Dan D, Michael Wiseman, Kathy Cotton, Cindy Plaza, me, Aaron Coalson, Phil Calderone, and Amanda McLeod. Please, if you would like to continue to see us do the work like this and have people on like Raj, please consider being a patron. We would really appreciate it. You can become a patron at tinyurl.com/shfunds. We appreciate it. Don't forget to check out our other shows on Skeptic Haven. We have, Secular Soapbox on Wednesdays. Of course, Thursdays is here with Sunny Spot. Saturdays, we have the Global Atheist and Women Atheist Unload. And then our newest show, Let's Talk, on Sundays, where you can call in and you can talk to us. And we really love being able to talk to people, even if you don't agree with this, that's okay. So support us, give us a like, subscribe, all of those things. It really does help us. We really do appreciate all of that. And if you are not a happy person, if you have a lot going on, remember there's Recovering from Religion. There's also the Secular Therapy Project. There are people out there who care, and we're some of those people. So in the meantime, remember to always think critically. Good night, everybody.
Our being knows this is where we came from. We long to return. And we can, because the cosmos is also within us. We're made of star stuff. We are a way for the cosmos to know itself.
If we are not able to ask skeptical questions, to interrogate those who tell us that something is true, to be skeptical of those in authority, then we're up for grabs for the next charlatan, political or religious, who comes ambling